Discover 9 sinister and spine-chilling true deep woods horror stories from haunted Appalachia. The Johnson family thought they were stepping into paradise when they abandoned the chaos of urban life. Mark, heavy with hope, led Sarah, Molly, and little Tommy to an overgrown, crumbling farmhouse nestled deep in the Appalachian woods. After years of urban stress, they were ready for a simpler life. But soon they would discover that the allure of nature wasn't all sunshine and trails, it was hiding dark secrets that clawed at the fringes of their reality. At first, their days were idyllic. They explored the winding trails, with Molly and Tommy darting through the trees like life and laughter itself. The evenings were lantern-lit stories by the fireplace, sparks dancing in the air as they shared laughter and joy, free from the city's chains. But soon, little cracks appeared in their paradise. One day while gathering firewood, Molly stumbled upon strange symbols carved into the bark of ancient trees. She shivered, the images twisting in her mind as if alive. They seemed wrong. Dark. When she showed them to her family, Mark's brow furrowed with concern, while Sarah's anxious eyes darted toward the edge of the forest, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. That night, the whispers began. They echoed through the stillness, sending jolts of ice through their spines as they huddled closer around the fire. Tommy clutched Molly's arm, wide-eyed, while Mark tried to appear brave, masking his dread with false bravado. Just the wind, he assured, though doubt lingered in his heart. Days passed. Eerie items began to appear around the farmhouse, a rusted doll's head peering from under the porch, tattered clothing hanging from bushes like cadavers waiting for release, an old locket with no picture inside. Each discovery weighed heavier in the silence, layering dread beneath their skin. The locals spoke in hushed tones, casting wary glances towards their new home, scoffing at their fears. "Mind your business," the sheriff warned, brushing off Mark's concern when they sought help. Each word tightened the knot of anxiety in Sarah's chest. Did they really have no one to turn to? In the shadows of solitude, trust began to flicker like the sputtering candles long burned out. Then they learned of Old Man Jenkins, the neighborhood ghost master, who whispered about vengeful spirits haunting outsiders. Unease pulsed through Mark. Could it be true? Were they just pieces in a larger, sinister game? Around the dinner table, the air was thick with uncertainty. They ate in silence, each face etched with an unspoken fear. That night, as the wind howled, rattling the windows, Molly found scratch marks etched into the front door. Panic gripped her heart. She felt a chill encase them like a predator circling its prey. They were trapped, the walls closing further around them with each creak of the old home, shadows flickering like an arm reaching out. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Fear twisted in their chests that night, relentless and consuming. They were no longer just a family, they were potential offerings to the horrors laid deep within the woods. Once a sanctuary, the land now breathed malignity. As they faced Old Man Jenkins, his cryptic warnings echoed in their hearts, a lineage unbroken, a darkness that demanded blood for peace. Doubt gnawed at them like rats in the dark. Were they willing to confront their heritage, or would fear claim them as it had claimed others before? The forest breathed around them, and as night fell over the farmhouse, they found the answer hiding just out of sight. The morning sun broke over the Appalachian ridge, but the Johnsons felt no warmth from its rays. Mark stood at the kitchen sink, washing last night's dinner dishes, each clink of porcelain echoing within the oppressive air. He tried to shake off the feeling constricting his throat. Something was wrong, the shadows cast by the morning light seemed longer, darker. They whispered secrets he couldn't grasp. Sarah wiped down the table, her eyes moving toward the grimy window. "Mark, do you ever think about old Jenkins? I mean, are we really okay here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Mama always said the woods have their own ways," he muttered, unwilling to invoke her warnings. He didn't want to give voice to the fears swirling in his mind. But the symbols Molly had found kept playing on repeat in his thoughts, like a horror movie that wouldn't stop. In the living room, Molly and Tommy played, their laughter a momentary balm against the terror creeping in. The boy threw a ball, his giggles slicing through the dread. Then, like a candle blown out, silence fell. "Hey, you two!" Mark barked, trying to gather the scattered pieces of his composure. "Why don't you go outside and play by the creek for a bit?" The obedience in their eyes unnerved him. They hurried out the door, and he watched them run, their figures shrinking among twisted trees. As the screen door creaked shut, a familiar sound echoed whispers. No longer in the night, they slithered through the cracks in the walls and crawled into his mind. Was it the wind, or was it something else? "Mark, please," Sarah whispered, stepping closer, frozen. "Do you hear that?" The whispers grew louder, a crescendo of overlapping voices curling around his thoughts. It was almost unbearable. He tried to focus on Sarah's anxious gaze, but behind her, shadows lurked at the corners, flitting away just out of sight. "What do you want?" he hollered into the stillness, half expecting something to answer. But it only returned with an oppressive silence, thick and suffocating. Molly and Tommy returned breathless, their small faces marred with fear. "Daddy," said Molly, her voice small, "there's someone in the woods." "We saw someone." No, it has to be a trick of the light," Mark muttered, forcing the rational words out. "What do you mean, someone?" "This girl," Tommy blurted, shivering. She looked sad, like she was lost. Sarah's face turned pale. "Where did you see her?" "By the old trees, where the marks are," Molly replied, her wide eyes blinking like saucers. They all turned to the window, peering through to where the woods shadowed the lawn. Mark's heart raced. Was this the spirit of the forest, another piece of the web that entwined around their lives? "Let us go check it out," he said, though every impulse screamed against it. "Stay close, and no wandering off." As they stepped outside, nothing felt right. The world felt too still, too quiet, like a predator waiting for its prey. With a hesitant skip, they made their way toward the trees, the whispers weaving through their thoughts, growing louder, more demanding. Mark was sure something was wrong, but dread drifted around them like fog, clouding every thought. Suddenly, without warning, the shadows morphed into something tangible. A figure stepped out from behind a tree, her hair wild, her eyes reflecting nothing but emptiness. The air chilled as she pointed a finger, aiming right at Mark. "What do you want?" he demanded, though he felt the fear gripping his throat again, every instinct telling him to run. "Your blood belongs to the woods," she intoned, her voice echoing like a long-buried memory. The whispers spiraled up to a spine-tingling crescendo, pulling closer to them, threatening to engulf them in darkness. As the ominous words sank in, Mark felt the chill seep into his bones. What had they stumbled into? Their hold on sanity was slipping, the truth was far more sinister than they imagined. Something wanted them, something ancient. "Run!" Mark shouted. But when they turned to flee, the forest seemed to swallow the sunlight whole, and horrifyingly, it felt as if the woods had teeth. What awaited them beyond the shadows? Would they discover the truth that lay hidden within the darkness? Their hearts thundered as they turned, racing away from the girl with the empty eyes. Thick branches snagged at their clothes, pulled them back like fingers of something unseen trying to keep them in the woods. Mark pushed ahead, his breath coming in sharp gasps, adrenaline coursing through him like fire. "Molly! Tommy! Stay close!" he barked, glancing back to ensure they were right behind him. He could see the panic etched on their young faces as they stumbled over roots and rocks, the whispers in the air mingling with their frantic breaths. "Daddy, please!" Molly cried, tears streaming down her cheeks, fear twisting her small features. The whispers bubbled around them, taunting and teasing, growing louder, as if the forest itself laughed at their terror. "Keep running!" he shouted back, even as his own feet felt heavier, like the earth was trying to pull him down. Sarah was beside him, her face pale, wide eyes darting around as though the trees themselves were alive, watching their every move. Each step echoed in their minds, a reminder of the unseen forces gathering strength behind them. They burst out from the trees and onto the open lawn, but the sunlight offered no safety. Darkness clung to them, an eerie shadow that refused to let go. "Mark," Sarah gasped, spinning around. "What do we do now? We can't just ignore her. That girl, she's not right, Sarah. She's south part of this place." Mark yelled, but even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind, settling like a stone in his gut. Hadn't they just seen something real? An apparition? "Look!" Tommy pointed, his voice breaking. Mark squinted into the woods where his son's finger was aimed. The same girl stood at the edge, just outside the trees, no longer pointing, but watching them, twisting her honey-colored hair with long, bony fingers. Her eyes were still an abyss, but now, a slow smile crept across her face, revealing cracked lips that seemed stretched too far. "Get inside. Now!" Mark shouted, urgency slicing through him. They dashed to the house, the door slamming shut behind them, but the voices didn't stop. They pulsed around the walls, rattling the windows, whispering secrets that shouldn't be heard. "What do they want?" Molly whimpered as they huddled together in the living room, shadows curling around them, disguised as home. Mark held them closely, forcing a smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "I don't know, honey. We'll figure it out." His voice faded under the weight of a looming dread. Tremors shot through the house, like the very foundations of reality were shaking. The whispers crescendoed into a choir of anguish, a cacophony of voices vying for his attention. "Mark!" Sarah's breath hitched as she pointed toward the window. Numerous fingers scratched at the glass. It was as if the darkness itself wanted to claw its way in, drawn to them. Mark's heart raced, his mind caught between fight and flight. "What is happening?" he gasped, his grip tightening on the kids as they shrank back, eyes wide and fearful. "We have to get to the car, we need to leave," Sarah urged, glancing at the growing shadows that pulsed and flickered, seeming to breathe with life. Mark nodded, his mind racing. But as they approached the door, a crashing sound thudded from outside. Something was pounding on the porch, and it wasn't stopping. "Stay here," Mark instructed, hope battling against terror. He crept to the door, heart in his throat, the whispers now an aching roar. He reached for the handle, but just as he was about to turn it, the knocking ceased. Silence filled the air, heavy and suffocating. "Mark," Sarah whispered, and suddenly, a voice, soft and acrid, slipped through the door. "Why don't you let me in?" A shiver ran down his spine. It was the girl, speaking without a face to connect it to. What awaited them in the hollow darkness? Was their only escape into the very terror they tried to flee? The air was thick with tension, almost choking Mark as he pressed his ear to the door. The whispers had grown quiet, but the girl's voice lingered, a haunting melody that danced on the edges of his sanity. He hesitated, the doorknob cold against his palm, glancing back at Sarah and the kids. Their faces were pale, shimmering with tears and fear, waiting for him to make a choice. "Mark, don't open it," Sarah pleaded, her voice trembling. "We can't let her in. We have to." A thud echoed from the porch, sending shockwaves through his body. Something heavy slammed against the door, rattling its frame. The kids jumped, clutching each other tighter. "Stay back!" Mark yelled, steeling himself. He swung the door wide, adrenaline pumping through his veins. An empty porch stared back at him, the night stretching out into the woods, deep and dark, the only sound a low rustling. But there was no girl, only the oppressive stillness. What is happening? Mark whispered, glancing over his shoulder at Sarah, her eyes wide and breathless. He stepped out, heart racing, searching for any sign of the girl, but there was only darkness swallowing him whole. Then he felt it, a chilling whisper on the wind. "You can't run, you can't hide." It slithered around him, wrapping around his throat. Panic surged in him, and he knew they needed to leave, but the feeling of being watched crept back like an old friend. "Mark!" Molly's cry pulled him from his dread. He turned to see her pointing at the ground, where a trail of small, muddy footprints snaked away into the woods. "Where does that lead?" Tommy asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and terror. "Back to her," Sarah said softly, horror dawning in her eyes. Mark swallowed hard. They could drive away, but deep down, he knew they wouldn't be free until they understood what was happening. "We have to follow it," he decided, urgency rising. "Are you crazy?" Sarah snapped, panic coursing through her. "It's dangerous out there." "I know," Mark replied firmly, "but we can't let whatever that is have the upper hand." He motioned for the kids to stay close and led them down the porch steps. As they stepped into the woods, shadows loomed around them, growing, shifting. The footprints sank deeper into the earth, almost inviting them. Each step felt heavier than the last. The whispers grew louder, drumming in his ears. "Why don't you let me in?" they sang, echoing the girl's voice, taunting them. "And Mommy?" Tommy whimpered, looking up at Sarah. Tears glistened in the corners of his eyes as he reached for her hand. "Don't be scared, Tommy," Sarah said, her voice faltering. "Just stick close to me." They followed the trail, heartbeats synchronized in their panic. Mark felt like he was being pulled into the very heart of the darkness. They passed ghostly trees that seemed to inch closer, their gnarled branches stretching out like bony fingers. Suddenly, the path opened into a clearing, and their breath caught. In the center stood a decrepit well, weathered stones nearly swallowed by thick vines and damp earth. There, next to the well, lay a twisted doll, its eyes missing, lying in the dirt. "What is this?" Mark demanded, crouching to pick it up. The ground trembled beneath them, and the whispers intensified. "Why did you come back? You weren't supposed to play." Mark dropped the doll, heart racing. They had to leave. They had to escape whatever dark force was waiting for them. "Run!" he shouted, and they turned on their heels, but as they did, the girl appeared again at the edge of the trees, her empty eyes gleaming with anticipation. The crack of laughter echoed around them, mixing with the whispers, a sinister chorus celebrating their fear. The darkness thickened, swallowing the glimmer of hope. As they sprinted away, Mark dared not look back. The sound of laughter followed closely, a persistent reminder of what haunted them. Was the well a gateway to something darker? What awaited them at the cliff's edge as they tried to escape? Branches snagged at their clothes as they bolted through the forest, the unsettling laughter trailing them like a specter. Mark's lungs burned, but he knew they couldn't stop. The girl, the whispers, everything they had seen was alive and clawing for them. Each heartbeat pounded in his ears, drowning out the urgent whispers that snaked around them. "Go, go," he shouted, pushing the kids ahead. Sarah lingered, eyes darting back as if she expected the girl to appear again, her gaunt frame ready to ensnare them. "Mark," she gasped, breathless. What if she— No time, he cut her off, forcing them deeper into the woods. They needed to put distance between themselves and that well, between them and whatever supernatural force had awakened. The trees closed around them, twining like fingers as they dove into the shadows. Mark's heart thrummed heavily, a relentless drumbeat drowning out the whispers, but they remained there, an undercurrent scratching at the edges of his mind. Suddenly, a piercing shriek froze them in their tracks. It was a twisted, echoing wail that sliced through the forest. Mark's eyes darted around, heart constricting in his chest. The cry felt close, too close. "Did you hear that?" Molly whispered, clutching Sarah's hand like a lifeline. Mark nodded, trying to swallow the lump of fear lodged in his throat. "We need to keep moving." They scurried through the underbrush, branches snapping underfoot, every sound amplified in the thickening air around them. But with every step, the sense of being hunted deepened. The quiet was now heavy and loaded, like the world itself was holding its breath. "Mark, look!" Tommy's voice trembled, pointing ahead. It was a clearing, not another well, but something just as sinister. Bones littered the ground, animal and something else, long forgotten and weathered by time, yet chillingly fresh in their horridness. "Get away from there!" Sarah shrieked, pulling the kids back. The smell of decay wafted from the clearing like a sickly breath. Mark's throat dried, and he could taste fear. "We can't stop here. We need to." A flicker of movement caught his eye. In the shadows, the girl stood, her empty gaze fixed on them. The laughter rose again, a cacophony of malevolence that danced in the air, curling around their legs. Each gut-wrenching giggle felt like a thorn in his mind, digging deeper. "Why did you leave me?" The words twisted from her mouth, smooth and chilling. Mark felt a surge of sickness wash over him. "We didn't leave you," he shouted, desperation bleeding into his voice. "We don't even know you." The laughter died momentarily, replaced by a cold silence that hung heavy. Mark seized the moment. "We need to find something to protect us. Anything. Over there." Sarah pointed to a massive oak tree. Its trunk was gnarled and twisted, roots sprawling like snakes across the ground. Shards of jagged flint seemed to twinkle from within the roots. "Kids, stay close," Mark ordered. He hurried toward the tree, and as he reached for a sharp piece, the laughter erupted again. This time it was mixed with a low growl, a horrible sound that vibrated the very ground beneath them. Mark and Sarah grabbed the kids, pulling them back as the girl advanced slowly, eyes glowing. "You came back, just in time to play let us go," Mark yelled, teeth gritted in determination as they raced back into the trees, the sound of the girl's laughter melding into the rustle of the leaves. What lay ahead? Could the oak provide the sanctuary they desperately needed? They had to keep moving as shadows danced between the trees, knowing that behind every twisting root lay a deeper horror waiting to be uncovered. A chill enveloped them as the darkness whispered, "You'll never escape." The darkness pressed around them, shifting like a living thing. They raced through the dense forest, branches slapping against their skin, tugging at their clothes as if trying to drag them back into the nightmares chasing them. The laughter, the haunting giggles echoed like a twisted lullaby, wrapping around their minds. "Mark, we have to find a way out." Sarah's voice wavered as she stumbled, nearly losing her footing. "Just a little farther," Mark urged, his voice strained. He could see flickers of light dancing ahead, but with each step, the shadows seemed to deepen, filling with unspeakable dread. Suddenly, they burst into another clearing, and Mark skidded to a halt. Before them was a vast expanse of twisted, blackened trees, their monstrous shapes clawing at the sky. It looked like something out of a horrible dream. Skeletal branches loomed, silhouetted against a pale moon that fought to shine through the night's veil. "Where do we go now?" Tommy whimpered, eyes wide with terror as he clung to Molly. She pressed against him, her face drawn, fear radiating from her. "Somewhere, anywhere but here," Mark replied, panting. The laughter faded momentarily, but the remnants of whispers were ever present, curling at the edges of his mind. "Look," Molly pointed to an old shack at the far end of the clearing, half covered in vines, its broken window panes like vacant eyes. "Maybe we can hide in there." Mark nodded, drawing the children closer. They rushed toward the dilapidated structure, heart pounding louder than ever, each step heavy with dread. As they reached the door, a sudden gust of wind howled through, almost as if the forest itself exhaled in warning. The door creaked open slightly, revealing darkness inside. "Stay together," he ordered, pushing the kids in first before following them cautiously. Inside, the air turned stale and heavy, like a tomb. Dust motes floated lazily in the weak moonlight filtering through the cracks. A chill danced along Mark's spine. This place felt wrong. He scanned the room, old furniture, scattered papers, and what looked like a rusted blade in the corner. It felt both comforting and terrifying. "Do you think we're safe?" Sarah whispered, fear evident in her breath. Mark hesitated. "For now." But even as he spoke, a soft sound arose, almost like breathing, a slow intake and release echoing through the fractured walls. The children's eyes widened, and Mark's heart raced again. He moved to the closest window, peering out into the darkness, fear clawing at his throat. There she was, standing just beyond the tree line, her empty gaze fixed on the shack. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, her voice like frost. The laughter began again, this time an agonizing symphony rising and falling. "We need to do something." Tommy's voice trembled. "I don't like this." Mark felt desperation claw at him. "We can't let her in. We need to barricade the door." They scrambled to move furniture, an old table, a chair to fortify their only exit as the girl grew closer, her form now almost skeletal, her hair cascading like shadowy tendrils. A loud crash rang out behind them. The floorboard creaked, splintering as someone else stirred. Mark whipped around, eyes wide as he turned toward the voice, but he was too late. The whispers intensified, wrapping around them, a cacophony of despair. The room felt alive, pulsing with dread. "It's not just her," he barely managed. And before he could finish, the light flickered, plunging them into darkness. "Something is here with us," Sarah's breath echoed in the void, the weight of realization hanging heavy without warning. A storm of furious laughter erupted, mingling with the whispers as Mark realized, with sinking dread, they were not alone. What had they unwittingly awakened? In the suffocating darkness, the silence seemed to throb, begging to unveil the truth. The darkness closed in tighter, wrapping around their bodies like wet cloth, suffocating and heavy. Mark's heart raced as he fumbled to secure the door. The air thickened with palpable fear, a smothering presence that seemed to seep through the very walls of the shack. "Mark, I can't," Tommy whimpered, his voice trembling as he pressed his back against the rotting wood of the wall. "Shh," Mark urged, his own voice barely above a whisper. They needed to be quiet. The laughter now surrounded them, bouncing off the walls, a mocking cadence that twisted his stomach. Just then, the floorboards creaked sharply beneath someone's weight. That sound, a hesitant step, felt like an invitation to the unknown, a signal that whatever lurked in the shadows was closer. Mark squinted into the darkness, desperate to discern movement, a form, anything. But it was all just shadows stretching and writhing, an orchestra of terror. Suddenly, a soft thud resonated from the corner. Was it the rusted blade? Mark's pulse quickened. He slowly shifted towards the sound, reaching for the faint moonlight that illuminated one edge of the blade, the cold metal glinting ominously. "Get back!" he hissed, retreating to the children, who were frozen in fear, eyes wide as they shared the overwhelming dread that filled the room. Then the whispers surged, louder now, a frantic crescendo of despair. Each word clawed at Mark's sanity. "Help us, help!" It was a chorus of voices pleading, as if the walls themselves held the wails of the damned. He could feel it press against his chest, the need to understand what was happening. Moments of silence punctured the chaos. It was then that he noticed that the outlines of figures could be seen swirling in the darkness, not just the girl outside. They drifted like vaporous shadows, indistinct yet undeniable, mouths moving as if sharing stories of anguish, faces twisted in eternal sorrow. "Do you see them?" Molly whispered, clutching Tommy tighter, her voice quaking. "Keep your eyes closed," Mark ordered, struggling to maintain his authority. He wrapped his arms protectively around them, forcing the images of despair from his mind. But the laughter exploded again, a guttural sound that filled the shack, rattling the windows and reaching into their very souls. It was an unholy symphony, rising and falling, twisting their resolve as the cold began to seep into their bones. "Who are you?" Mark shouted into the darkness, more desperate than brave. "What do you want?" The laughter recoiled, a deep silence falling like a shroud. Then, a girl's voice, soft yet sharp, through the walls of shadow, replied, "We want to play." Breath hitched in Mark's throat. He glanced at the kids. Their wide eyes reflected the moonlight, mirroring his panic. "We don't want to play," he yelled back defiantly, trying to pull strength from his fear, but suddenly the door shuddered violently, rattling against the makeshift barricade. The sound was followed by a low growl, a guttural warning that made the hairs on Mark's arms stand on end. "Let us," and the voices whispered, "or face the game." The shack trembled, as if the very earth was responding to their terror. The children began to cry, and Mark felt bile rise in his throat. "Stay back!" he shouted at whatever was outside, ready to defend them as best as he could. "What game?" he ground out, forcing himself to stay calm, desperate to understand. But they only laughed, a mocking sound that sent chills down his spine. The door creaked again, and the growl morphed into a howl, one filled with hunger and rage. A loud crash shook the shack, splinters flew as the door gave way under a powerful force. "We'll make you play," echoed through the darkness, just before the now-freed void rushed in, claiming everything in its path. Mark braced himself as the shadows lunged forward, desperate to consume him and the children, knowing the night was far from over. What fate awaited them now as the forest seemed to hold its breath, ready to embrace or destroy? The darkness enveloped them, a living entity with fangs. Mark clenched the rusted blade, its cold metal grounding him in the nightmarish chaos. Shadows twisted around the children, their cries piercing through the silence, a clarion call of despair that echoed against the walls. "Run!" The word escaped Mark's lips, but it sounded weak against the tide of terror crashing in. Tommy and Molly exchanged terrified glances. They couldn't move. The shadows swirled closer, their laughter morphing into guttural snarls, hungry and deliberate. In that moment of dread, Mark thought of his brother, lost to the forest, lost to fears he couldn't shake. He couldn't lose these kids too. "Close your eyes and hold my arm," he shouted, the harshest command he could muster. With trembling hands, they clung to him, digging their small fingers into his flesh. The shadows flickered and jolted, writhing against the shack's interior like a storm. Mark knew there was no door anymore, no buffer between them and whatever madness had breached their sanctuary. Outside, the night roared, a cacophony of wind and whispers that carried fragments of lost souls, shrieks that seemed to weave through the splintered walls. Then, as if orchestrated, the laughter crescendoed, building like an impending storm. Mark squared his shoulders, adrenaline fueling him. "Whatever you are, I want to let you take them." His voice rang out defiantly, and for a heartbeat, the shadows hesitated, as if considering his challenge. In that bleak moment, he saw shapes, faces twisted in grief and rage, eyes pleading. "Join us, play with us," they beckoned, a harmony of seduction and torment. "No!" Mark bellowed, and the cry echoed, drenched in resolve. Twin agony wrapped around him. Fight this evil or surrender. He edged backward, his heart pounding in tandem with the pounding of whatever demon now rattled the shack. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward. Mark swung the blade, though it felt like cutting air, like swiping at mirages. The very shadows hissed and recoiled, swirling around him as if they were alive. "Mark, please. I'm scared." Molly's voice broke through, small and terrified. He felt her grip tighten, grounding him but also pulling him back. Was it courage, or was it despair sapping his strength? The wild howling outside melded into whispers, the very walls of the shack groaning under the weight of a malevolent force. Mark caught glimpses of figures at the edge of perception, a gaunt child, a woman with hollow eyes, faces of the forgotten. They all had a tale, a sorrow so deep, it resonated in his bones. "You know what the game is, don't you?" The girl's voice pierced the veil again, seeming to float in from every corner. "You must choose." "Choose?" Mark's heart sank. In that instant, he realized the weight of his fear. It was not the game of survival, it was the game of soul. Would he sacrifice a piece of himself to save these kids or let the shadows consume them all? The shadows lunged, and with every ounce of strength, Mark shouted, "No! I refuse!" But with that cry, the air grew cold, and a sudden flash of unearthly light illuminated the room, a swirling vortex of horrible, inviting joy and despair. His decision loomed before him like the edge of a cliff. Then Molly screamed, "Look!" Her finger pointed to the rising mass of shadows, the faces intensifying, gathering into a single form, all hungry for one purpose, eyes glowing with a lust for play. Mark's breath caught in his throat. What had he done? What dark forces were unleashed? The game was about to begin, and he wasn't sure they would survive to see its end. What truly awaited them in the depths of this terrifying play, survival, or possession? The forest outside seemed to stir once again, as if waiting for the next move to be made. Molly's terrified eyes widened, and Tommy's grip on Mark's arm felt like a vice. The shadows pulsed, drawing closer, forming shapes that morphed into grotesque facsimiles of human forms. Mark could feel the air thickening around them, charged with an unspeakable dread, pregnant with threats and promises alike. "Mark, don't let them take us!" Molly cried, panic rising higher in her voice, her small body trembling against him. "I'm not going to let that happen," he promised, though his heart beat hard against his ribs, leaving the words feeling hollow. In the flickering light, he saw the shadowy figures, their mouths stretched wide in unnatural grins, teeth that glinted like sharpened blades. The laughter morphed again, becoming a whirring whisper that echoed in his mind, pulling at the corners of his sanity. "Come play at LLB Fun." The voices sang, dulcet and terrifying. Each syllable twisted around him, inviting him to step closer to the abyss. Mark tightened his grip on the blade, willing it to hold weight against the encroaching terror. "What do you want? Just let us go." His voice was a thin thread, and fear threatened to unravel him. The lead figure stepped forward, its face veiled in shadow but the outline sharp like a cruel caricature of childhood, its proportions wrong, twisted. "We only want to play," it cooed, its tone sweet yet laced with menace. "But first a sacrifice must be made." Molly screamed again, breaking through the dark spell that seemed to bind them. "Please. What do you want from us?" The creature tilted its head, a flash of darkness where its eyes should have been. "One must join us. One must stay forever." Mark felt ice grip his spine. He realized the true horror of the situation. It was not about saving themselves, it was about their very souls. The choice laid stark before him. Would he offer himself to save them? His mind raced, spiraling into despair. "Never. I won't choose," he denounced, his voice resolute, but doubt clawed at him. Could he fight the darkness and win? The shadows hissed and expanded, filling the small space until Mark felt he was suffocating. "It's not just a choice," the shadow child whispered, hands outstretched. "It's our game. We don't need to take your life, just your will." Heart thumping, Mark looked at Molly and Tommy. Innocent lives caught in a web that spun deeper than their understanding. If he surrendered even a piece of himself, would they be safe? "I won't be a pawn." He spat defiantly, conflicting emotions tearing through him. "Then prepare, for the game will begin." The shadows erupted, torrents of darkness flooding the room, swirling around them like a cyclone, distorting their surroundings. Mark's mind swirled. Cries echoed all around. The children still clung to him, their fear igniting his determination. In the midst of the chaos, a fleeting thought sparked. In the shadows of his childhood, he'd always felt watched, the forest a constant memory of something lurking. Was it finally coming for him? And then, horrified, he saw their twisted faces, not just those of the past, but of his own family, long lost to time. Each figure pulling at his consciousness, demanding he acknowledge their sorrow. "Join us, we've been waiting." As the darkness clawed at his mind and his body trembled, he had one last fleeting moment of clarity. He turned to the children, his resolve renewed. "I will not abandon you." That moment, everything snapped, and the shadows shrieked, a symphony of wrath and despair that shattered the sanctuary. Mark lunged forward, determined to break through the tidal wave of madness. But the moment he took his step to the embrace of the shadows, the room pulsed and flickered, and he felt his sanity stretch, about to snap. What awaited him in that devouring darkness, the sacrifice or salvation? And as the shadows leaped and lunged, a chilling laugh resonated through the chaos, leaving them teetering on the precipice between life and the abyss. In that defining instant, as the veil began to tear, Mark could only wonder, would they prove strong enough to confront the shadowed depths, or seal their fates in eternal play? The darkness quaked around them as Mark steadied himself, freezing mid-lunge, a moment of clarity pushing through the chaos. He turned back to the children, their innocent faces lit only by the faint glimmers of moonlight that managed to pierce the shadows. Tears ran down Molly's cheeks, and Tommy trembled against his side. Dread coiled deeper within him, but he wouldn't let them down. "Stay close," he whispered fiercely. The shrieking laughter echoed, a haunting symphony that layered despair upon despair. Shadows writhed like a living creature, each flicker pulsating with an otherworldly hunger. This is it, Mark thought, terror mingling with incandescent determination. It was a threshold they could not linger before any more. He surged forward, blade gripped tightly, slicing through the darkness like a beacon. "You think I will play your sick game?" he bellowed, the weight of his resolve igniting something deep within him. The shadows recoiled, hesitating, whispers faltering before the strength of his defiance. "Join us," a familiar voice rasped from the encroaching dark. It twined through the air like a serpent, unmistakable, someone Mark had loved. "We can be together again." His heart strained at the echo of lost memories, his brother's image flashing in his mind. But he forced it down. "No!" Mark shouted, pushing away the pain. "I want to be a part of your curse." The blade glinted, reflecting the moon's light as he spun to face the spirit. "You are not my family. This is not my home." In that moment, clarity surged within him, a vision scattered but undeniable. The swirling shadows began to fracture, like a shattered mirror exposing the truth behind their faces. Those who had come before, lost souls playing out their nightmares in an eternal loop. "Mark. Please." Molly's voice cut through the blur. Mark snapped his gaze back to them. "We can't leave you. We can't." Tommy cried, pulling on his sleeve. Their fear radiated, and it fortified him like a shield. "You're my everything," he managed, voice trembling, but filled with fire. "I fight for you." The shadows recoiled once more, sensing the tides shifting. "Sacrifice is needed." "No." Mark roared, "I will not sacrifice anyone." As if fueled by the very essence of their resolve, he stepped forward, a primal roar tearing from his throat as he faced the swirling mass, unyielding. "Mark." "The well." Sarah's voice sharp, commanding, cut through the chaos. In the fog of impending dread, a memory stirred deep within. The well. Old Man Jenkins' warnings, the dark power that slumbered there. It was not only darkness, it was potential, a way to end the madness. "This is the answer," Mark declared, and with a single thrust of courage, he turned, leading his family toward the looming shadow of the well, running faster than he had ever run before. The laughter and whispers chased them like a malevolent wind, but he would not stop. As they reached the clearing, the shadows twisted and screamed, clawing at them. "You can't escape," they warned, voices shrieking the chilling histories of the damned. "Keep going," Mark shouted, adrenaline fueling him. The gnarled roots of the well stretched before them like claws reaching into the earth. It loomed, its mouth a dark abyss, steeped in centuries of anguish. "No more playing," he yelled defiantly, raising the blade. "I end this." With a desperate lunge, he plunged the blade deep into the well, feeling a rush of wind whip around them as if the forest itself gasped. The ground trembled, and darkness lapped against the walls of the well as if agitated. A swirling vortex erupted, and the malevolent whispers transformed into anguished screams. "No!" The figures of lost souls coiled in terror, racing to the edge of the well as if it threatened to swallow them whole. Mark could feel the pulse of the forest shift, freedom calling. "Hold tight!" Mark yelled, gripping Tommy and Molly. Sarah yanked him back, and they stumbled as the earth heaved beneath them. The shadows writhed like angry serpents, desperate to clutch their prey. "We need to jump!" Mark shouted. Together, the four of them leaped just as a scream echoed, one of defiance, one of terror, as the shadows were sucked into the abyss, swirling away like leaves in a storm. The wind shifted. The world quieted. Mark gasped, blinking against the bright moonlight flooding back into the clearing. They landed hard on solid ground, hurled away from that dark pot. They stumbled, breathless and racked with disbelief. The whispers faded into nothingness, swallowed by the anguished cries as they resided in the well. "Daddy?" Molly whimpered, encircling his arms around him, trembling. "Are we safe?" Mark looked into his children's eyes, feeling weight lifting off him. "Yes. I think we're safe." They fell into one another's arms, relief washing over them like a wave. A gentle breeze swept through the woods, whispering of redemption, new beginnings. Together, they staggered back toward their house, no longer a haunted shadow but a fresh start. As they approached the farmhouse, the moon lit their pathway, illuminating their journey from fear to hope. The darkness was not completely gone, it lingered in distant, echoing laughs, but they had fought hard, together, for their freedom. Hand in hand, the Johnson family stood at the threshold of their new life. Together, they reclaimed their sanity and vowed to live in love and courage. They gazed into the woods, now just shadows in the night, a reminder of the past that they would carry forward, but they would not let it take them again. "Let us go inside," Mark said gently. Sarah smiled through her tears, and they ventured back into what would be their safe haven, but as they crossed the threshold, a soft breeze rustled through the trees, a playful whisper echoing through the night. "You'll play with us again." The Johnson family stepped inside, leaving the past behind, but knowing that they had fought the darkness and had emerged stronger, together. Now, the real journey lay ahead. You need to subscribe now to keep up with these exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood that comments section with your reactions and wild theories about the ending. Don't let this moment pass you by. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know about this chilling conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.